In the first half, I'm going to read you poems from my book, The Flight of the White Horse. In fact, I'm going to read the whole book to you. It is inspired by a local legend that insists that the Uffington White Horse, which is a Bronze Age hill figure, leaves its place on the hill on certain nights in order to drink at the spring at the base of the manger. Well, when I thought about that, I thought if I was a horse and I was made out of chalk and I had the power to leave my hill, I wouldn't just go for a drink. So these poems make the assumption that after he's done that, he might like to visit other places on the Ridgeway and meet some of his fellow chalk figures a bit further afield as well. So we're going to get half his journey, then some more music, and then the other part of his journey after that. I think he might want to visit the stars as well, so we'll start with that. The White Horse and the Milky Way. Bored of grass, the white horse strays onto the Milky Way. Trodden stars clag his shoes like Ridgeway chalk in rain. Across interstellar voids he trails their detritus. Beneath his hooves, nebulae are disturbed. Asteroids scatter. Black holes open up. He startles as night fades, flashes back to turf, remembers he is only chalk. Well, the scouring of the White Horse is a regular event run by villagers in the Vale of the White Horse, and it involves removing red algae from the surface of the horse, which turn it into a red rather than a white horse very, very rapidly. You remove that with a trowel, and then you hammer in fresh chalk in places where it has eroded. So this is the White Horse submitting to a scouring. It is essential to remain perfectly still and resist the urge to arch the spine or cause a minor earthquake. The crust of algal bloom itches like eczema, and the white horse feels something like a whale who cannot rid his tail of barnacles. That scratching with a gleaming trowel keeps him on the edge of ecstasy and pain. And when fresh chalk is hammered into his pockmarks, it hurts worse than the reverse of depilation. He mustn't even twitch his tail or close his one visible eye. If only he could raise his head and nuzzle the nearest child. Well, hidden beyond barbed wire at the bottom of White Horse Hill on the opposite side of the road that snakes its way down there is a wood, and in the middle of the wood there is a spring. You have to trespass to go there, but I have been there and it's wonderful. The white horse drinks at the spring beneath the manger. The spring which feeds the Ock, which feeds the Thames, comes out of a pipe in a glassy gush, a column of molten ice. There is snow enough to burden every branch, and a constant dripping that breeds liverworts and a black and wholesome sludge. The white horse comes gingerly, lest his hooves be smirched. Chalk mingles with ice crystals, stars become lost in snow. When the white horse drinks, there is no disturbance. The perfect spurt is not spattered. There is no spray, no sound of lapping, just a slow absorption of water into chalk. The little fossils in the horse's eyeballs breathe again. His whole form is a white swarm of animalcules swimming for their lives. A white sign forbids trespass. A white owl spies a mouse. Just above where the White Horse sits on his hill is Uffington Castle, an Iron Age hill fort. The White Horse over Uffington Castle. There is a moment of awkwardness, scrabbling out of turf and into sky. The horse must leap his first hurdle, half lying down, and shake the Bronze Age silt from his underside. Those grassed ramparts are new to him, comparatively. He saw the earth thrown up long after antlers were used for digging, flinched a little as the stakes were driven in. Tribes made him their emblem, although the idea of him had grown in a fist-sized clump of flint. His spine a glacial contour, bared by men with the earliest spades. From those, they progressed to aeroplanes and cars, made lights to dim the stars, took too much stock of time. He falters, bridles, bolts towards Orion. Wayland Smithy is a Neolithic chamber tomb a mile or so further down the Ridgeway, so he's made it down to there by this stage, visiting Wayland Smithy. There is a smattering of asteroids and mist. Chalk hills are indistinguishable from clouds. Both have their ramparts, curves, flutes and coombs, gallops strewn with orchises and stars. The horse traverses them both. Soil and space are one to him, tramping the crowns of beech trees, clovers, cumulonimbus. He is held aloft by winds, the hootings of owls, the breath of ravens. Sheep and sarsens become identical, sleeping in the fields. There is whinnying above the smithy, an uncanny clattering in air, and out of the moth-dank cave something comes. The anvil rings, sparks and stars are one. The horse shudders chalk dust, paces, grows calm, raises his fetlock for the shoeing. Further still down the Ridgeway is one of my favourite places. On the downs above Bishopstone there's a spectacular set of strip lynchets, an ancient field system overlooking the whole of the valley, and it's a wonderful place. When you walk down into it, a sort of silence descends, and it's hard not to get in touch with some form of spirituality there. It is just so special. So this is the White Horse over Russley Downs. The lynchets are a negative print, a system of shadows spilled with a blench of moonlight. Beach hangers sleep, villages are dormant. The White Horse embosses himself in sky like a watermark, an undulation of chalk against cloud. Forking coombs wear uncanny silences for shrouds, the land engraved with centuries of human toil, the dead's intaglio in soil. It took me ages to find the next place. Snap was a thriving village in the Middle Ages and right up into the 18th and 19th centuries. And it still appears on a road sign, but if you follow the road sign, there's nothing there. It's completely vanished. It's all under trees. The White Horse was round long before it was even built, looking in on Snap. Even the White Horse has his work cut out finding Snap, though he watched it thrive as a Celtic village, state of the art. It was old when its name was written down in the 13th century. By Victoria's reign, it was known to breed country folk of uncommon health. They lived into their 90s in 10 or 15 houses, and the schoolroom doubled as a church. He cranes his neck through the branches, catches a glimpse of Snap High Street, a rutted track of chalk erratically cobbled, overhung by trees. House foundations are marked by nettles. A box tree has outgrown its garden, the gardener cast out by economics. The farmers who lived there could not compete with cheap American corn, and at the end of the century fell prey to invention. Frozen meat from Australia, New Zealand cost less than lamb from Snap. Mr. Wilson, butcher, bought up the land. Some folks hung on, lived off barter in the schoolhouse, but time has a habit of whittling away, and the mortar crumbles for the elder tree. Street plans become earthworks, marks. The White Horse sympathises with Marx being one himself. One of those urchin tests falls out of his eye, rolls onto the lane. He cocks his ear for the nightingale who doesn't sing. To Westbury, there is a White Horse at Westbury. The Westbury White Horse is probably ancient, but its form has completely changed. It now looks just like a bog standard horse really, and its surface is now made of concrete and it's scoured by steam blasting, which is about as unromantic as you can get, I think. So the white horse is nonplussed at Westbury. The white horse cannot suppress a snort or two of recognition before that inevitable sense of deflation sets in. There are even ramparts of a fort in the right position and a grassy eye. But the beast itself is staid, restrained. It barely blinks or shudders, just stands there looking handsome, doesn't paw the turf or kick up a lump of flinty loam, tame as a work of taxidermy. The lower lip hangs as though anaesthetised. The fossils in its skin have a look of extinction about them. Long ago, the Westbury horse had been good company for a gallop through the Pleiades. On dark nights, the old sickle tail was an acceptable substitute for a moon, and it scattered the lesser stars with stumpy legs. But that colt has been buried by enlightenment, the replacement inert as clay, quite drained of skittishness. Nothing works, no piaffe, passage or pirouette can provoke the slightest whinny. If the white horse is going to visit chalk hill figures, then he will need to stray to Cernabus. The Cernabus giant is still the only supposedly pornographic image which the British Post Office will handle unwrapped on postcards. Things the white horse will never tell, the form of worship at his holy hill, whose lips have touched the blowing stone, how each hole in it was worn, how Sexbury, Liddington, Barbary were built, whose bones were buried and whose burnt, who went to hunt, who stayed to herd, who first cupped hands at Swallowhead, which fingernails were grimed with clay at Windmill Hill, and on which day the first brooch was cast in bronze, where the swifts go on the breeze, where Lob goes, how Grim hides when farms fall to grasping hands, the ways and words of ancient folk, how to read their dreams in chalk, and when and why the virile man was etched in turf beneath the moon, and why his full frontal girth was matched with an Egyptian gait, and whether he would love or drub his foes with an ill-fashioned club, and how the lovelorn think it right to lie upon his shaft all night. And when the post office came to grips with him on postcards, the white horse skips a bit, frolics, thinks to lick unmentionable parts, knows he can run twice as rampant as any man. Okay, that's got him halfway on his journey. The white horse is rapidly approaching the Avebury complex, which is one of my favourite places in the world. And the first thing he will come to is Silbury Hill. Silbury Hill is also Neolithic. It's the tallest prehistoric human-made mound in Europe. And what frightens me sometimes is that there's a road going past it, and people drive past it breaking the speed limit and ignoring what has to be one of the most spectacular ancient landscapes in the world. And every time I drive there, I'm just stunned, and I've driven there many times, and the experience never kind of loses its thrill somehow for me. The white horse surveys Silbury Hill. 35 million basketfuls of chalk, stone, rubble, soil, excavated chunk by chunk with antler spades, stone axes, sweat, blisters, deaths of strong men, and past man to woman, woman to man, in a ragged line, worn with fatigue, and not ever dumped, but sculpted, stepped, rounded, heaped into a hill filled with offerings, bone, mistletoe, ox ribs, flint, moss. Brawn made it, but also brain. Whole lives flowed and ebbed. Autumn leaves dropped from trees 150 times. Men murdered, made love, sowed, reaped, ploughed, sowed through short lives, plod by plod. until one day it was built. But why it was built and what burned to sacrifice at its summit, no one remembers. The motive is all gone, and the white horse was not engraved in turf in those days. If they grieved some chieftain wrapped in moss, time devoured his stripped remains. Brachiopods in the white horse's eye open like watches. He scores the sky in a holding pattern. BMWs break speed limits on the A road, brook no compromise with time, and miss it all in their frenzied quest for bliss. Avebury is a giant Neolithic henge monument. There are stones, there are huge ramparts and equally huge ditches, which would have been even deeper at the time they were dug. And it's now the site of a village which is partly encompassed by the stone circle. Houses from the village were partly built of stones taken from the megaliths. There was a period where fires were lit at the bases of the stones to split the stones and use them for building material. But there are still enough stones left standing for it to be a really remarkable place. The White Horse over Avebury Cove. Rime lends Sarsens a chalky hue in moonlight, squat stone and tall gaunt in the field. Micrastas cluster around the heart of the White Horse. The ash tree wears its own crust of frost, the twigs brittle, upturned. Beyond ditch and rampart, the church is founded on split sarsens, its font etched with dragons, each subdued beneath a bishop's feet, his crozier raised as if to deal a fatal blow. The White Horse sees pagan and Christian frozen in stone, each household walled with sarsens turn inwards on its hearth. Earth is dormant, chalk horse, fossils, flint, stars, frost, these breathe and live. The White Horse hightails it over Avebury. It's that calm arrangement of objects on a gigantic scale that pleases him every time. Ditches excavated, mounds piled by spades made of shoulder blades of oxen, man-killing sarsens transported on tree trunks with ropes of nettle to hold them steady, the thunderous clump of silbury raised out of piles small as molehills, the sanctuary, its burden of dead flensed by kites, and great stone-mouthed barrows where skulls and long bones were filed like books in libraries for future reference. The White Horse knows there is nowhere like it in the world. Tests of Sidaris give him goose pimples. There are tremors amongst ancient corals in his tail. Then there is the church hanging outside the cursus like a satellite, or a menhir from a missing avenue of stones split by fire for building houses, and those modern roads gouging through the village, channeling buses from Swindon to Devizes. And to think the whole place was once an ocean full of Beelamites who prayed, ate, waned, died, transmuted to bullets of stone. Swallowhead Spring is not far from Avebury. It's the source of the River Kennet, and there's a willow which overarches the spring in an almost perfect arch, which is usually covered in brightly coloured cluties. The White Horse decides to go to ground there, as we'll see, to hide from prying eyes. Sometimes the White Horse gets tired of celebrity status, loud children treading in his eye, turning 3 times and making wishes. People setting up easels, thinking they're Revilius. Devotees of von Daniken insisting in his hearing that he is a message for aliens. And then the archaeologists get going, digging down to his thigh-deep underside, sampling silt. A horse has got to kick heels occasionally. Sometimes climbers on his back tickle and itch like flies. Even at dark moon, there is the danger some human do-gooder will climb up there, find he has absconded, leaving behind a dusty horse-shaped trench. And when he has scampered off, a mile above the ridgeway, making diversions to visit his chalky friends, he risks being spotted by some drunken neo-druid who has staggered out of the public house at Avebury for a pee. It has happened once or twice, and the white horse has loped into the cirrus, then come panting to ground at Swallowhead, craving water. He lies, flat as East Anglia, splayed out across the landscape, his head slotting perfectly under the arched bough of an ancient willow. A clootie is sucked inadvertently up his nostril. He has to suppress a sneeze. All around him there's an ooze of wetness which will make the kennet augmented by the winterbourne. His leg sinks whitely under the spira gyra. Now his breath is held, but no one comes. No one notices the black shadow of his absenteeism. No one reports him as a UFO. And the neo-druid's Wiccan friend has bought another round of real ale. A tardy swallow decides to migrate. The horse blinks. It begins to rain. Windmill Hill gave its name to a culture, the Windmill Hill culture, because of its very distinctive pottery, clear evidence of farming as well. And it was inhabited from the Neolithic to the Bronze Age, and there are artefacts from all over Britain buried at Windmill Hill. So it was clearly quite a wide-ranging culture. This is some of the conversation in this is kind of a reported speech from a visit that I made to Windmill Hill. "There's not much here," a tourist said earlier today. "Just a couple of barrows, and we've walked all this way. Nice view, though. Pity you can't see Avebury much, except for the church. Those trees ought to be trimmed, and from this distance, Silbury looks smaller. Darling, aren't you cold?" The white horse hears the echoes of that voice and 1,000 others, but the older ones have more resonance, and they travelled too, importing pottery, limpets and whelks from the Cornish coast, arrowheads of Portland chert, Mendip sandstone, Cotswold slate. Amid the voices of makers and merchants are murmurs of children, their bones in the ditches. The white horse inclines his ear, hears yet darker echoes from layers deeper than Bronze Age barrows, the laughter of women rounding pots out of kennet clay, laying the foundations of culture. His deepest deposits of silt begin to luminesce. He touches ground, prods with a gentle hoof, feels the thrumming of all that existence under compacted earth, and the little buried things carved out of chalk come alive at his passing, the crude phalli throbbing in the loam. "There's not much here. Barrows, Avebury, Silbury, church. Darling, aren't you cold?" Obviously, poor White Horse has to return to his hill to put up with more tourists walking all over him and various other things. On the day when I finished this series of poems, the Red Arrows were doing a display over White Horse to that phenomenon. I had also taken a helicopter flight at the White Horse show in Uffington just so that I could film the White Horse for an internet reading of this poem. And it was most disappointing because the helicopter sort of just went straight up and straight down again. And it spent more time sort of circling around a sort of gigantic crop circle phallus than it did actually looking at the White Horse. So I was devastated by that. Paid a lot of money for it too. But anyway, so this was written on the night after that. The White Horse among the stars. The White Horse spent half an hour this morning watching red arrows. He had to do it. He was pinned to the hill, and it is inadvisable to blink with so many people standing in your face. They spewed out red, white and blue smoke, and horses of flesh and blood also turned to watch them. Every stallion and nag for miles around, facing in the same direction. The White Horse doesn't need Wikipedia to know the history. 1969, a gnat hit trees, 1 fatality. 1971, 2 gnats collided, 4 men dead.
1987, a hawk crashed into a house. No one died. Insurance paid. 2011, crash, death, still under investigation. Iraq War, 114,731 civilians dead. Afghanistan and counting. The White Horse doesn't understand. He hasn't taken sides in wars or watched Top Gun, and the sound of children crying makes the fossils in him grind. When helicopters took folks up there to glimpse him from the air, the whole thing took 3 minutes from start to finish. His making took an age. It began with sea things' lives. He was born out of them with the whole hill. The downs formed in the ocean swell. Seas receded. Glaciers gouged out the manger. Men emerged. They saw his form long before they cut it, looked from afar and discerned his arching spine on a windy landscape strewn with thistles. They paced him out from ear to tail, etched his throat with picks, dug his body deep. And when pilots and passengers are asleep, the fossils resonate, the eyeball widens. The White Horse peels himself from the hillside, looks down on village, orchard, town, blesses that child who helped to scour him with her little trowel, arches himself. His forelegs grapple with the turf, as though he was some imago emerging. That eyeball revolves. And at once he is leaping, catching thermals like a peregrine, slicing through clouds, slipping out of our atmosphere, leaving the merest smear of chalk, cavorting with Arcturus, aligning the pole star with his eye, seeking Betelgeuse in the armpit of Orion. Earth becomes invisible. Each fossil becomes a star. And Nick Owen is sitting back there. He and I are sharing an exhibition of poems and photographs in the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford for the next month or so. So if you would like to have a look at that, it's going to be just hanging there by itself, hopefully being looked at by a few people. Nick also introduced me to Vani Capildeo, who is, I think, one of the most amazing poets working in this country at the moment. She's really, truly extraordinary. She wrote a review of my poetry the other day, and it was so nice that I'm going to read you the whole thing. He has a wonderful sensibility for the layered British landscape and for a kind of bright darkness. That's the end of the review. Okay, which just thrilled me, absolutely thrilled me. She only wrote that to me just a couple of days ago. She put it was a Facebook status, actually it wasn't a review, I lied. Promoting this event, and I just love that, a kind of bright darkness. So that was 2 days ago that she said that to me, and that night I thought, how do you repay something like that? Well, you write a poem, don't you? So this, I've got no idea whether this poem is any good or not. It probably isn't, I don't know until some time afterwards ever. A kind of bright darkness. There is a stile still standing in the ghost of a hedge, and a broken gate beside it, opening on the pathless nowhere of a ploughed field. I don't walk there, nor do I retrace my steps down the route I did not take to get here. Cuckoos are silent, so next time I must be gone. The nearer ground has lapsed to shadow. The middle distance echoes with a kind of bright darkness, as though the slow alchemy of sun and soil has not made gold, but crumbling crusts of verdigris. The sky is strewn as at an augury with molten copper. To scry it is to go blind. This aching transmutation of light into a sightless knowing is all that I can give you. My hands and feet have vanished. No one walks. The landscape is in flux. British landscape has been the basis of many of my poems, and I just want to read a few about objects in the landscape. This one's a lyric. It's actually a song lyric, but I'm just going to read it to you. It's about Wayland Smithy, and it's called I Sing the Smith. I sing the smith in spring, when the swallow on the wing swoops at insects high above the stones, and the fields of greening wheat and the cowslips at my feet mark the ancient walks and hallowed bones. The scroll-tight beech tips burst, and beer has done her worst, where the megaliths stand pitted by the rain. As the throstle wins his note, it grows rich within his throat, and all the wood is lilting to his strain. In the summer, Queen Anne's lace makes me jubilant. The place is chanting with the robin on the bough, and the yellow hammer flips where the lapwing's peeping chicks hide among the ruts left by the plough. The field mouse and the toad creep across the old chalk road, and the campers pitch their tents amid the wood. The tomb is cool and dank as the willow herb grows rank, and the megaliths are dappled, tall and good. By the autumn, ripened haws bring field fares in scores, descending on the hedges in a rush, and the roebuck and his doe flash their tails and fleeting go, where the beech invokes the Bronze Age with her blush. The fields turn gold as sun, where the brown hares jink and run, evading dogs and guns amongst the straw. And the megaliths are dry, aspiring for the sky, where the red kites call to windward as they soar. And when the trees grow gaunt, I come to Wayland's haunt at the solstice as the smith climbs from the earth. He shakes away the clods, laughing scorn on newer gods, holly green and hail through winter's dearth. The snow-encrusted rocks hear the coarse bark of the fox, and his spraint is pungent, feral as the storm. But I scorn to stay at home when the ridgeway bids me roam, for I know that Wayland's hearth is red and warm. Folklore insists that if you leave a sixpence at Wayland's smithy and tether your horse to the tomb, Wayland the smith will replace the horseshoes by morning. I've dwelt on this one a number of times. This is Wayland's shadow. Wayland Smithy is a wonderful place for shadows because it's surrounded by beech trees, so it not only casts its own unique shadow, which shifts and changes at different times of the day and different times of the year, but the beech trees themselves often interconnect with those shadows. He is at a tangent to us, a stone tipped on its edge. His substance is a lack of light, his stillness an illusion. Smocked to the knee, pock-marked with smuts, his legs are stilts. Take a sideways glance, he'll raise his hat to you since you left that sixpence, no hollow salute. He is made of nothing, moulds himself to beech leaves, sarsens, frosted grass. His friends are heartless, his house vacant. He walks like a dead man, or one who was never born, but stepped in through some gap or unstitched gusset, groped his airless way towards being, and then eschewed it, stayed on those trammelled lines of shadow, made himself one with vacancies of rocks and trees, took trouble time after time to align himself with uprights or with horizontals, made his blankness one with theirs, lurked into them, identified with erasures. Follow with your third eye the danceless ballet of his approach, the inexorable blending of that which is not with that which shouldn't be. Watch naught become a leaf, a stone, a tree. Watch him watching you. Be cold, be dead, be free. I love picking up flint tools. There's a field near Uffington that yields a surprising number of artefacts. Most of them are Bronze Age, although they're made of flint. But there are also Iron Age remnants there, Iron Age pottery in particular. This is called an ancient blade. I always think it must be such a thrill to be able to make a tool out of stone, especially a small one that's no bigger than your fingernail. There's that sure sense of a job well done that can span millennia and survive several hundred sowings and reapings, to have worked perfection into this paring of stone, precision napping, chamfering both sides with deft little strikes, admiring the translucence of the edge, the leaf-like curve of the outer blade. It can only have hatched a smile of satisfaction. It is a fine gleaning, a claim to fame, a little soliloquy in flint, a tiny Bronze Age shout of triumph. Saxon objects in the museum. I'm just going to read you one poem about some of those. There are some really spectacular ones in there, but I'm going to go for the comparatively unspectacular. Some buckles. They're the ones that please me the most. And they're not ostentatious, decorative, solid gold buckles like the one at Sutton Hoo, which isn't actually a buckle, it's a fake. It doesn't work. You would have had to sew it on. But really utilitarian buckles. Why aren't there more buckles in modern fashion? Buckles on shoes. Well, anyway. My boss is going to be merciless at teasing me about that. Come on, tomorrow. Buckles. A buckle for a king is no buckle at all, an ornamental token sewn on where a buckle might have been. It recalls a dragon with interlacing scales, eyes that never tarnish. It takes a whole boat to bury its owner, but the tongue of his buckle is silent, welded in place. Lesser buckles have ways of speaking, buckles that puckered tucked garments, buckles on shoes, functional buckles at the ends of belts, halfway down leather straps for slinging satchels, buckles for attaching scabbards, closing purses, joining mismatched bits of leather, burnished buckles, buckles with a green patina, pock-marked buckles 6 feet under, buckles that stopped swords, held babies in place, chafing buckles one notch too tight, buckles at the throats of dogs, dainty buckles, buckles strong enough to hold a heavy horse and never buckle. Give me a buckle fit for function, of bronze or iron, not of gold. Give me a good black strap of leather, punched for snugness, and a buckle to hold my heart together, to stay intact, though I turn cold. A lot of my other favourite places are churches, and perhaps more particularly churchyards. I seem to spend a lot of time looking into churches through church windows. So this is a little series of poems inspired by churches and churchyards. First one is called The Shadow Consecrates. It was inspired by shadows which are cast, cross-shaped shadows which are cast on Uffington Church by the floodlights. Of course, the crosses are gravestones. The shadow consecrates the stone between the altar and the bone, a tangible absence. I stand without, within they sing, my soul and theirs all spiralling towards some presence. I see the light, I hear the call between the lich gate and the wall, and keep my distance. The shadow weaves the loom of loss, a hollow tomb, an empty cross, raised like a monstrance. The shadow consecrates the bone that lies beneath the lichened stone, and I am present. The congregation sing within, by gargoyle's tail and angel's wing, and I am absent. I mentioned staring into church windows. One of the reasons I love to do that is because, of course, often the glass is very old and it distorts the reflections and distorts what you can see inside. So I spend ages taking photographs like this one, which are virtually undecodable. It's a window study. From this angle, my own reflection leaks in runnels like molten sugar as I scry the windows, reading refracted angels. They sing prognostications, each one wearing a green patina of algal bloom and mirrored woodbine. A knight reclines in the day dark of a yew, the altar flowers arranged amongst chimney pots, preserved in toffee, chains of candelabras suspended in emerald confection. Pulpits swirl beneath the stirring, blurred by blackthorn. Fonts stand under streams, leaves dappling the nave, and down the aisle there dances a line of graves. There's a blackbird, I swear he's been the same one for as long as I've lived in Uffington, who sits on a particular post just at the opening of, or the entrance to Uffington churchyard, and he sings just beautifully. I love the sound of blackbird song, so this is for him. Churchyard blackbird. Black and haloed, my spiller of gold, stark and hallowed as a gilded ghost, raptured rhymer of the honeyed throat, pert proclaimer of embodied thought. Spell me my tidings, cast my weird, illumine my way with a bird-like word, sprung from the core of the yew's red roots, up through the stone and your splayed foot, in through your gizzard, gritted and green, out through your bill, yellower than grain, into the air, emblazoned with sun. Sing and I live, fly, I'm undone. Just over where that blackbird sings, there's a thorn tree, and I noticed just the other day that it's a red flowered thorn. I must have noticed on previous years, but it never quite sunk into my consciousness properly. So this again is a very recent poem, a response to that thorn tree, the red flowered thorn. For too long I ignored you when you were gaunt and leafless, and the blackbird stropped his bill where the groins of bark were worn. I wrote songs to the yew, praised the map-like forms of lichens, scrawled eulogies in grass among the gravestones. I tried to catch the tones of church bells, found words for shadows, wore paths across the lawn, drew down the church tower's grave octagonal form, but the truth of you eluded me. It's only now, with my heart half set awry and my back part turned to go, that this strange way of noticing comes over me, and your blossoms, warm as spilt blood, spray about the churchyard wall. I've been bitten, thorn. I cannot stop to staunch you anymore. The Church of St Michael and All Angels in Summertown in Oxford, I don't know if it still has it, but for years it had the most amazing display of paper angels, all of them hanging from fishing wire from the roof of one of the aisles, and they were just extraordinary, just beautiful. So this is about them. I wrote this in a sudden rush, sitting there staring at them in the church. Paper angels. Paper angels in the parish church sing like ghosts of insects, escaping cocoons of tissue shroud, scaling filaments of spider web toward their vault of heaven. Their antennae have looped themselves and fused into halos as they rise, bleached mayflies in a nimbus cloud. Sunlight tickles them into subsonic stridulations, glorying in their metamorphoses, spiring on glued and crumpled wings, white imagos on frames of wire, surveying paradise with compound eyes. One last one from this series. There's nothing so controversial actually as a churchyard in one sense, and that is that some people like it mown really, really short and really often until it comes to resemble a bowling green. And other people like the opposite, they like it overground. I'm in the latter category, I'm afraid. There's something about not a completely overgrown churchyard, but one that is managed for wildlife, which is allowed to grow like a meadow and then is mown in the autumn, which I think is just wonderful. And it kind of agrees with my feelings about life and death, I suppose. This is called Uffington Churchyard. I'll bear with death as a going to ground, a bunkering down, an embracing of loam, my skull in the yew's root. Weeds on my mound are heralds bringing a prodigal home. I'll rise as an umbel, white lacy flower and tubular stem with tapering root, and under my stone I'll gratefully cower, nourish the seed and furnish the shoot. My coming home will be met by a host who'll rise from their graves on the night of my death. Grass be my spirit, and nightshade my ghost, and only the wind shall remember my breath. But cut down these weeds, and my seed cannot grow. My coffined old soul will have nowhere to go. She moves through the fair, which is one of my favourite songs, and I love it because it's such a sad ghost story as well. My loved one came to me, my dead love came in, so softly she entered, her feet made no din, and then she went away homewards with one star awake, like the swans in the evening drift over the lake. I just love that. It's consummate writing, whoever wrote that, they're anonymous, but... Okay, so here's a poem about ghosts in churches, parish ghosts. In wet, neglected churches, where algal bloom sways the windows in a greening blush, the ghosts are not unquiet. Little wizened ladies, rearranging spectral flowers, flaunting empty dusters, shuffling slippered feet down flags and browning brasses. A sneeze scatters them, or a voice raised too loud in benediction. In gaunt medieval churches, where lords lie in state alongside ladies with alabaster arrogance, their gauntlets clasped in insincere obsequies, the ghosts arrest you with a chain-mailed curious probing, as though to plumb the powers that make you modern, and question the fates who gave them strength, then let it wane. In private Templar churches, where tourists numb to spirits scroll in visitors' books that the atmosphere is peaceful, questing ghosts are flickers at the corners of our eyelids, snickering mirages, pulpit shadows stretching a yard too far down quaking stone-paved naves. In their time, they have stabbed backs or laid schemes at beheadings, dreaming sharpened axefulls and laden dripping baskets, their dark interiors twinkling with drying dead men's eyes. But in the grimmest churches, where bodies are exhumed, transplanted cold as organs packed in ice, the mothers and the sisters, impotent and desperate, rack and rend their skins with airy nails and screech their searing separations in the visitors' wan faces. Cock robins fall dead from the firmament, hearts torn by ghost voices. In the grimmest churches, the dead rage, clamour, beseech, beckon, reach to clutch you, hold you in their red and beating hearts. Their fingers wring our fleshy throats and clench on air. One last poem. I've been writing a few poems lately that are about landscape and about wildflowers on the surface, but underneath they're about my friends, so this is for all my friends here. It's called Forget Me Not. Forget me not, I thought you said, and your gaze was straight and true. I wondered by your garden's edge, could I disremember you? The light refracted at your heart, a warmth that radiated through. No, I dare not let them fade, those powdered hues of pink and blue. Forget me not, I hoped you said, as the summer bleached to white. It was the hope that startled me, like a swallow into flight. Forget me not, I know it's true, little flower of grace and light. The time must come, whate'er I do, when I remember in the night. Forget me not, I know you said, and I was aching with the need to cry that I could not forget, so deeply planted was the seed that it would germinate in drought or in soil too choked by weeds for any other plant. Forget me not, you said, and I agreed. Thank you.